Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, and we are in the midst of a very special mini series called Up and Running with Red Hat Satellite. So it's been a couple of weeks, but I'm Eric the IT guy Hendricks, and joining me for this mini series is one of our solutions architects, Mr. Richard Rios. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome back. We missed you. It's just never the same when you're not around. What can I say?
Are you sure?
Oh,
Pretty sure no one noticed I was gone.
oh, I certainly did. I certainly did. I gotta say, I love the intro animation. It's very snazzy. I like it. I'm
Yeah, we
sure people have
actually had
commented in
a
the past, but I really do like it.
we had one of our vendors come up with that for us. So really excited that we got that and into the terminal and got a new one last year as well. So uh, awesome materials. Media nerd. I forget who it was,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, let's do a bit of a recap here.
yeah,
So in episode one, we took the entire episode to install successfully an
yes.
instance of Red Hat Satellite. And then last week, um, the demo gods were not so were not so kind.
It's okay.
But I figured what we could do is real quick because it has been a little while, and because we did have some things blow up on us during the previous episode. I wanted to do a little bit more of an in-depth recap on what we've done. So we took a RHEL 8.10 system. We made
Hmm.
sure that the disk layout was correct. We did an install.
Hmm.
You can check that out in the playlist. The link will be below. Check out episode one on how to install satellites step by step. We did it on air and even talked about what satellite was in between the package installation. So it's a pretty good episode. Then last time we talked about setting up repositories. So as I kind of click on the buttons, Rich, you want to very briefly talk about what some of the different views are?
Sure. Once we had the installation, we then started looking at our subscriptions, what we were going to make available to our hosts. As in, we had our got our manifest, and in there we added the subscriptions for both RHEL and satellite itself, so it can be consumed by hosts in the future. And if we can go to the next section. Then we added some actual content so the host could actually get their binaries. We had enabled the recommended section, so it's going to, by default, it's going to give you all the OSs you're going to want without all the optional and additional content, but specifically the agents for satellite, the version of RHEL you're probably going to use. And as you see here, we have some RHEL 9, both the base OS and the app stream. Keep that in mind. From after RHEL 7, this is the approach on 8 and 9 that we're going forward. On RHEL 10, we expect to see something very similar to that. Let's see what else did I think that's all we added. And what was the next step? We also added
So
a
then we
third
created
party
some
EPEL.
lifecycle environments. We did do
Yes,
we did add EPEL as a third party repository, although I didn't
yes,
set that back up today.
that's okay. Just I thought I mentioned it. So we had Apple added in case you need something from Apple, and created the sync. But then you want to have your different environments for, let's just say, your production and your dev or test staging. Sometimes you have just two, sometimes you have five. Just depends on your environment, and you might even have different ones for different organizations or for different business units or different roles. But for this case, we're trying to keep it nice and simple. We have just production and dev, and I believe we created also a content view to be go along with that. If we go there, basically we selected and told it what actual um, did we add the repos? Did we get to that point? I'm trying to think, or I'm thinking
Yeah,
ahead of myself.
we got everything set up last time, so we got
Okay, so
all the way up to
all right, so we did get all the repos installed that we wanted. As I mentioned, the client, the RHEL 9, and the apps. We didn't create any filters, and we created it. That created version 1 when you get started. From that point on, I believe we went to version 1.0, and those are all the packages and the errata, accompanying errata that goes along with it. And then what I call one of the magical components of satellite, which you'd be surprised how many organizations do not use activation keys. So we created an activation key where it really puts everything together. And by that I mean, you're selecting when you add a host to your satellite server and use an activation key, which if you look at the very where is well, that'll be in the next window. Um, we can select what environment we're going to go to. So dev in this case, and the content view that we have for 2024 Q3, and we've already pre-selected the service level. So all the hosts that we're going to add are going to have a standard subscription. They're going to be in the dev test environment, and they're going to be RHEL Linux servers for the role, and you can even have add-ons. One additional thing you can even go to include is you see the section where it says release version. You can even stipulate there the version of RHEL that's going to be. You can say, hey, this is RHEL 9. So the person who sees it automatically be able to tell that. Now, if you go into the repository sets, it should have in there the repos that we've added to it. And there we go. All the RHEL 9 and satellite clients, maintenance, and we have not added any hosts. I think we might have one already that we added. If we can go to host collections.
Yeah, there should be one host. Or maybe not.
And by the way, it does take a while for it to populate depending on how you have your environment configured. And if you click on associations.
You know what? I may not have re-registered that host.
That's okay.
That's okay. Nope, there it is.
No, there it is. There it is. So that we have that one RHEL host that has been associated. This is on the host collections, meaning one thing we could have done, we could have created a host collection of groupings and include that. So they'll belong to the group. For example, you could have a group of web servers, deep databases, file systems, whatever you might have, or middleware, whatever you want to call it. But you can also associate that. So the powerful component of satellite is the treating 100 hosts as one. Right? It's not the one-off work. It's when you doing it in tens or thousands of hosts. That's when satellite really becomes that magical tool that makes your work so much more efficient. All right, so I think we're there on that space. Do we want to go visit the sync side or begin the actual? Since we already have the lab up and we have our RHEL 9.
Well, before we go too deep, I know we talked after last episode that we kind of glazed over activation keys fairly quickly. So I know you had some additional thoughts you wanted to share about activation keys sort of in the real world.
Yeah. So actually, I just had this conversation with a customer of mine, in which is, you initially do your activation keys and you think, I'm good, right? Everything's working, and in these systems, I just add them and I'm good to go. It does all this work for me. It puts everything in its right place. But what if a year later you have a renewal of your subscriptions and the subscription number changes? Things of that nature. And yes, you want to have your host to auto attach the subscriptions so it can pick them up. But if the subscription that you had before you manifest has expired, it can't grab that. So you want to make sure that you've added to that subscription key the new subscriptions as you acquire them. Otherwise, it's going to go, nothing. Is there anything that even resembles for what I need? Oh, you have, I don't know, 20 satellite infrastructure subscriptions? Those will do. I'll grab those. So be mindful that you want to have it up to date, and that's where you want to go instead of having to touch every single one by doing it at the activation key level. Updating the subscriptions, it is done just once, and all of the systems that have been activated with that. can take advantage of it.
Yeah, activation keys are so powerful. I mean, just beyond the ability to register a system without having to type in your username and password 1,000 times. But as you could see, you could designate what environment that you're in, the level of support, premium or standard, designate whether they're production or non-production. There's just so much that an activation key can do. Just like Richard was saying, just make
Yeah.
sure that you stay on top of those subscriptions.
And there's the other, on the flip side of that. Let's say, as an organization, you have a new division you're incorporating, or you spin it off a division, right? This is going to be a solely owned subsidiary. They're going to go on their own. You could actually take some of those hosts and separate them and move them to maybe a new organization or a new new grouping, things of that nature. So you, instead of having to do one-offs, you can grab a whole set, for example. So all those changes, not just renewals, but changes to your environment, or let's say you have a new ability to some new content. Let's say a new repo you want to include. You can add that at the activation key level, and they'll now see that repository. Because once again, you cannot install what you can't see. So if you have not added that repo to be part of the activation key and part of that content view, they can't see it, they can install it or update it.
All right, so now that we've given activation keys a little bit more of the attention that they deserve,
Mm-hmm.
why don't we dive in? And where we left off last time was we'd gotten our first host registered,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't done anything with it. So I was thinking, Rich, if you're
Mm-hmm.
so inclined, why don't we dive into the host view and see what
Yeah.
information that Satellite collects on RHEL 1?
The very first one. All right. Right away is the nice thing about it is telling us right away what we have as far as any outstanding security bug fixes that are available that have been, I should say, have been synced to the satellite server. Very important. So if your last sync was a month ago, that's the content that is going to compare and tell you what you're missing. So this is why many organizations might have a much more frequent, especially when it comes to security syncing. Depending on what your requirements are for your organization, that way you can begin the testing and validation before you bring it to production. But yes, it'll show you what bug fixes you're missing, as far as what security fixes you're missing as well, the level of severity, what the binaries that are affected. Let me cheat a little bit. I'm gonna go full screen so I can read this because my eyes are not what they used to be. Um, so we have 26 bugs and 20 in security. If you can go ahead. Yes, I was going to say, click on one of them. It can give us a better visibility of what we have here. And you can see we have some low, some high, some moderate, important. And if you were to, for example, right click on the very top one, the moderate one, kernel level, and right click and click on new. Hopefully this will work. Uh-oh.
I didn't share the window. I only shared the tab. There we go.
Got it. Okay. Here it's basically taken us to a much more deeper insight into what exactly it is. It's showing us the actual CVE that's associated with it, what it does, what Red Hat has done to show what it's affected. And if you go back up, it's telling us that we need to reboot to take effect. You can then, if you had a myriad of hosts, you can see which ones are being affected. And the pack, you can do look at the repositories as well. But more specifically, people are going to be more interested in the packages that are really being affected. So they can start looking at, okay, are we consuming any, obviously we are because we have a host that is affected by it. But now you're seeing exactly a full list of what's affected. So let's say if you have your in-house development and you're worried about, well, how's this going to affect us? You can now go to your dev teams like, okay, these are the things that are being affected. Let's start looking at it. Let's do some testing. see if the new fix is going to break our application. All those things. These are very useful information to have handy and to work with your dev team in that respect. All right. You think we can roll back to where we were before?
Yep. Although I just broke my share.
It's okay.
Doing great. Let's share the window instead. I was trying to be efficient here, and that didn't work.
Hey, I'm in a great mood. Okay, we're below 100 degrees here in Dallas, Texas, so that's a day of celebration. Is actually we're in the 80s, ladies and gentlemen. That is amazing for Dallas, Texas.
So tell you what, why don't we fix one of these? Why don't we fix one of these CVEs?
Okay.
And then we'll jump into installing packages. So one of the nice things about the satellite console is that everything is filterable. So we can always, if we're looking for enhancements, bug fixes, or security, we can filter that way. We're already looking at security, so why don't we just go and see in our environment, is there anything that's critical?
Nope.
Good news is our one system, our one dev system, has no critical issues. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out that filter. And let's check important. Okay, so we do have a handful of important ones. What about installable? There's a difference here, and it's very subtle. The difference, the main difference between applicable and installable is applicable is it exists, but it may not impact your environment.
Exactly.
Versus installable, this is a problem. There is a package that can be updated. So why don't we just narrow our list down a little bit further? And now we've got 10 items here that are important level, and I know all of you are awesome sysadmins, and you'll go through and check each one and make sure that everything's kosher before you go in and start applying fixes. But we only have a 30-minute show, Rich, so why don't we go ahead and just select all?
Wow. Okay. All right, and
then
here's the part where everybody gets starts asking questions like, well, which one should I do? For this particular case, we want it right now. So we would just click on apply. But you could schedule a time. Let's say you're an organization that has a Patch Tuesday policy. You could certainly do that as well. So here we'll look at the job. It's going to process it. This is a demo, so it's like Vegas rules. Like, all right, come on, 7.
So we can actually go all the way down to the host level itself and see that it is, in fact, installing packages.
Yep. And
watch this live.
It's gonna because it is a kernel module, and I believe one of the things we read when we looked at the CVE that it does require a reboot.
It does. We're not using Kpatch, and we don't have Tracer installed on this host, but we did notice in the CVE that it will require a reboot.
All right.
That is not what I wanted. There we go. Back to John.
Tino, thank you for doing the conversion of Fahrenheit to centigrade. I've lived in the States so long that I don't think along the lines of centigrade so much, but it's pretty darn hot in Texas. All right.
So it's still showing pending. So why don't we circle back to that? Just because this is a live demo, it could take a minute. So far we've worked with one host in one environment. So why don't we go ahead, because we do have 2 hosts in this environment. Why don't we go ahead
register those bad
and
boys.
let's set the stage. Sorry, I'm refreshing my lab on the back end because it timed out on me last time, and I don't know why. So it says we have an hour and 17 minutes left on this lab, but I just refresh it just because I'm a paranoid systems administrator. Yeah, a little bit of activity. All right. So we've got one host in one group in one dev environment. Let's double that, and let's have a second environment with a second host. I know we're getting crazy on the RHEL Presents show today.
I know.
All right, so let's start from the top down. We're going to start back in content.
Yeah.
We're going to go into lifecycle, and let's go to lifecycle environments. Actually, we already did this initially. We went ahead
Right.
and created our prod view. So what we need to do is adjust our content view.
Ooh, you want to create a different version for dev and one for production, don't you?
Actually, I was thinking we just promote the existing content view, and then we'll
Yeah, yeah,
create
that's what I mean.
we'll
That's
create a
what I mean.
second view and show how
Cool.
that works.
Yeah, because
So
we
there's
want the newer view to go to dev and the older view to go to production. So yes, makes perfect sense.
So if we were to jump into our time machine here and move forward a few weeks, so you see we've got a content view created,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of environments that I worked in patched by quarter. So you do
Mm-hmm.
dev test 1 month, you do stage and pre-prod the next month, and then you do
Mm-hmm.
production the third month. So it was broken down by quarters. I always wanted to get that down to monthly, but that never worked, unless I spent all of my time patching. But so a lot of times when I think content views, I think in terms of calendar quarters.
Right.
This again, your mileage may vary. So we've been working in dev. We tested like some of the CVEs that we deployed. We've
Mm-hmm.
got some systems registered. We're happy with it. All the devs and DBAs have signed off. So let's go ahead. We're going to promote this content view. So the Q3 sync. Let's go ahead and promote it up to
There we go.
production.
It's been around long enough. 26 minutes is enough for it to be promoted to production. I mean, come on. Of course it is. It's been
Right.
fully vetted by now.
Hey, if you're using CI/CD and infrastructure as code and all those things
Yes.
like you're supposed to, yeah, it might
Yes.
be enough.
Of course.
But in our book, yeah, 26 minutes is more than enough time. So now all those packages that we had in
Mm-hmm.
2024 Q3 is now available to our production servers. So then as we move forward, we'd probably want to create another content view, and this would be
Mm-hmm.
2024 Q4.
Mm-hmm.
So we could go ahead and start building that library of content for the next quarter. We'd go through the same process. We'd pull in all of our RHEL 9
Mm-hmm.
repositories. We'd add those. We'd want to update our activation keys. But now we've got a second view here. We need
Before
to
you click
publish.
away,
Mhm.
if you can go back one, I know I always do this to you. So this is where you could also get creative and say, you know what? This is the second iteration, content view version 2, and we decided we don't want anybody to even think about install HTTPD on those hosts. So you could actually put a filter in there and say exclude the package and say, you know what? I don't no. Yeah, put the name exclude filter, and HTTPD. Oof,
That
wow,
is one of the
say that three
hardest
times fast.
package names to say ever.
I know. And then you could actually add to the rule. So guess what? Anybody who even toys with the idea, if they can't see it, they can install it.
We're an
HT-
Nginx only.
that's right. Hey, but that's the idea. As your environment evolves and you define what the new standard is, or security says, you know what, nobody should be able to install these packages. You can start excluding them, so they're not even an option. So when they give you an audit, it's like, well, hey, they've been excluded since this date. All right. Hello, for
And
those
one
who's joining
thing,
us. Thank you. All right, go ahead. Sorry, I know I caught you midstream, but I think it's powerful to show that.
mhm. Yeah, and one thing I forgot to do was we forgot to publish this. So we're going to go ahead and
Yes.
promote it
Well, I stopped
to
you right
dev.
before you publish. It's like, wait. One more thing. Do we want to
Yeah,
publish
so
it to?
don't
Yeah.
forget to publish. Otherwise, your
Yeah.
systems will just stare at you like there's nothing there. So that'll publish in the background. So we've
Yes.
got our new content view up. So we're in lifecycle. We've already got our lifecycle environment. We've got our content
Mm-hmm.
view. Now we want to go ahead and update our activation keys.
Mm-hmm.
So now this one. we'll want to update.
Need a new activation key.
Well, we can update the old one first.
Yes.
Because now
Yeah, we're
any
on the
dev
Q4
systems that
content
we
view.
register, we want to
Yep.
register to the Q4 content view.
Yep.
Now, like what you were saying, because we don't have any systems registered to production, now we'll want to create a production.
I kind of wish it had an option to say, clone this one and then give you the option to change the content view and the environment, and you're done. And obviously the name. But
So
that's just me being picky.
Yeah, it's a fair idea. So you notice under environment, I selected production, and it only has one of those content views. That's because 2024 Q4 hasn't been promoted up to production yet. So we'll select the only option available. We'll save that activation key. Go check on repository sets. Make sure that anything that's RHEL 9 is enabled.
Yep.
Notice that Satellite Client 6 packages isn't enabled by default, so we'll go ahead and click that checkbox and override to enabled, because we want those satellite utility packages available in case we decide to use them. And notice here, this was I'd filled this out ahead of time in the other view. So it's a production box, so maybe we want premium support.
Yeah.
And then usage type, we already mentioned it's production.
Yep.
And we're just going to kind of fill this in here and narrow down the scope. So if you had like an EUS add-on or HA, high availability, we could add those to this key as well.
Resilient storage, any one of those.
Yep. So now kind of everything's kind of narrowed down a little bit. So now we've got our production activation key.
Yep.
Now we need to go into a group. So we're going to go under configure, host groups. We'll have our application servers group. And this is kind of nice. I probably should rename application servers, but we're going to actually nest inside application servers. We're going to have application, what do I call it? Prod. Sorry, I got to check my notes here because otherwise copy paste doesn't work here in a minute. Yep, application prod. It's going to inherit the satellite source. We want this one to point to prod. So it automatically updates with the content view. We'll talk about Ansible roles next episode. Hint, hint. It'll be fun. So then we want to add our activation key. I think that pretty well covers it. So let's go ahead and create that host group. So now you notice we've got one subgroup, we've got one host, nothing in application prod yet. So now I've got to go in.
Got to register a host for it to show up.
Right. So once again, this is a limitation of the lab environment that we're using for this. Otherwise, you could do like auto discovery, or there's a number of different ways that Satellite can find these servers. But because the lab environment we're going to use this fairly gnarly looking hammer command, which is basically going to generate a command for us that we can run on the host.
Nice.
So we've got host group, again, lab environment. So we're going to force the registration. We're not going to use insights today, and we don't care if it's secure or not. We just want to generate that command. All right, so this even more gnarly looking command, it's going to point to where the system should register to the URL. It gives us basically a registration key, and we're going to run all this through Bash. So RHEL 1 is our dev server. RHEL 2 will make production. So we're going to run that, and just like you would do a subscription manager register or an RHC register, it's going to go through the registration process.
It's usually pretty quick.
Yeah,
especially since it's local.
Yeah. So now, by the time we go up here to monitor dashboard,
we should have an additional host.
So it's not showing up here, but I bet by the time, if I were to go by all hosts, there it is.
There we are.
Ta-da! So you notice it's in the application prod group. Right. And it's starting to populate a lot of those same bits of information that we saw in the dev environment.
and I believe it's the same build, so it's going to have the same bugs and patches. Although, if we were to look at the RHEL one, since we have patched it,
Oh yeah,
it
that
may or
task
may not
should
reflect the
more than be done by
patches.
now. In
Yeah, but
fact,
it might
if we
require
were
a
to,
reboot for it to register all
you're right.
everything has been patched.
So why don't we check on jobs here? There it is. Install errata severity important. Succeeded.
Yep,
Total host 1. We can go in and look at some of the details.
success.
That's, that's always a good sign. If you had any failures, you could look at host detail and get some additional insight.
Yeah.
And just in case on the back end here, I'm going to go ahead and reboot RHEL 1. But in the meantime, our production environment isn't going to be much good without some packages, without a workload. So what I'm thinking is, why don't we install some software?
Okay.
So if we go into hosts and go in, RHEL 1's rebooting, so we'll do this a little out of order here and go to RHEL 2.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we were looking at was the packages and package versions as they apply to errata. But if we were
Mm-hmm.
to come into content and look at packages, you can see everything that's installed, including everyone's favorite text
Okay. Here
editor,
we go.
Vim. We can see what version. We can see if there's an update available to it. But I actually want to install some packages here.
Emacs to make everybody go nuts.
How dare you? I just blanked. What was I doing? Oh yeah, I'm installing
Installing
packages.
package.
Yeah, see, there's now people in our audience that cannot get out of Emacs because you mentioned it. So thanks a lot. So if you go into
I
content,
am known to be a bit of a stirrer.
that may or may not have been why I asked you to jump on this mini series with me. So if we go into content packages,
Yeah.
we can install packages.
Oh, absolutely.
And trying to think of one that's not typically installed here. What about maybe
Cockpit
we're
would be a
running
great one.
So Cockpit should be installed, but how about some Cockpit add-ons? So I think what I
Podman.
was, yep, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Love me some Podman.
Yep, all of my home lab systems have Podman on them.
Yeah.
Of course, it's taking its sweet time thinking about whether or not it's actually going to
And
install
that's
or
okay.
not.
While it's thinking, I just learned something new that I think we should share. So, in our first installment of this series, we talked about the version of RHEL you needed to install satellite on satellite 6.15. So, satellite 6.16, which should be coming out very soon, you can install it on RHEL 9.
Really, I hadn't heard that.
Ah, yeah. So on 8 and 9, you can do start with 8 and upgrade to 9, or do a migration. There's multiple ways, but that is one of the things that I know people asked us, I believe, in the beginning. Yes, that people want to do it on 9. Yes, you will be on 6.16. So 6.16. Of course, as I say that, I always have to put a caveat. That's what is expected until it's released and it's GA. But what I've been told, this is what we should be expecting.
It's great to hear. And with that PSA in mind, our inventory of packages finally decided to load. So one thing that I found incredibly helpful is I do like me some Podman, but what's even sweeter than Podman is installing Podman images with Cockpit. So if you're familiar with the RHEL Web Console, there's actually a plugin for managing Podman. So let's go ahead, and we could just install it right off. But I won't this time, because this is production. I don't want to break anything during the day. we're going to customize our execution. So it's going to pre-populate what the job is. There's other jobs like Ansible commands. You can run bash scripts. You can run convert to RHEL, leap. Actually, I should
A smorgasbord of commands.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. So we're going to go ahead and use Catello because that's what Satellite's using in the back end. And we're going to install a package. So let's go ahead and click next. And we're going to apply it to the one host. We could apply this to individual hosts. We could apply this at the group level. Yep. Groups is probably the way you want to do this, but we'll just go with the host level.
One off. This is just a one off right here.
Yep. We can include pre and post scripts. If we need a special SSH user, gives us a lot of options here. But
you could even add a reboot, couldn't you?
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
So now we're going to do a future execution. And you can either set this statically or dynamically, more or less. When do you want this to run? I could see using this like in the case of an emergency patch window, where you want to make sure you get the absolute latest version of of a package. But we're just going to do a static query, whatever version of Satellite whatever version of cockpit podman we get, that's fine. So let's go ahead and let's have this install at 11 p.m. I figure that way it can install and I can check on the job right before I go to bed. There shouldn't be any other users, so why not? Of course, this is Central Time. I can review my options and click submit. Now, if this lab were to live long enough, which
it would happen.
It'll be offline in about an hour, but but then when we came into the office tomorrow, actually something we may want to do is restart the cockpit socket. That way, next time I log in, I've got all the updates to cockpit as well. So, I mean, that's just one package on one host. There's so many other things we could do. That kind of brings us to the end of our prepared comments. Oh, wait, nope. So we talked about content views and promoting content through different views. There's one other thing that we might want to consider is we want to know when new errata is available without impacting our views, or without impacting what packages and package versions are in what views. So the way we can do that is we can actually define a sync plan, and we did this briefly in the first episode, I think. So this may be something you want to run every night, and so when I was a satellite administrator, one thing that we had was a sort of a sandbox, and so any sysadmin tools, any bastion hosts, jump boxes, whatever you want to call them, that our team managed, we didn't care to run them through the patching cycle. They were kind of outside of that, and so they just got the latest greatest packages always.
Right.
So that's what that library view can be used for. So what we might do is we might set this up to where all of our repositories sync daily at, say, 2 a.m. We'll have this start tomorrow at 2 a.m. and I'll sync every day at 2 in the morning. That way, when I get into the office, all my repositories have synced, and all those updated packages will show up in the library. They won't be applied to certain content views. So if I go to install a package in production, I don't accidentally overwrite it with something that hasn't been tested in dev, but at least I'll have that information and it'll be stored on my satellite server. That way, when I go to check a host or a group of hosts, that I can see that, oh, there's a new piece of errata here, so we need to check this package and promote it through ad hoc through our content views. So we created our sync plan. Now we can go in. We don't have any repositories, so let's go ahead and Let's just sync everything. Why not? We're at the end of the hour.
Right. That should be on the list. Yep.
Yep,
There's
there we go.
two. Boom. Good to
So
go.
there we go.
Select the action. See, as always in open source and in Linux, there are so many different ways to do the same thing. We can go back to the menu. We can from here select the activity, the action to take. So
I could even sync it now.
yeah,
All right, Rich. Any closing thoughts?
no, I mean, I got to tell you, the time goes by so quickly.
It does.
What we try to accomplish. The one thing we haven't done is actually now that we have two, or if we had more than two hosts, create a group and then get the most everybody I imagine can get the concept of having those grouping and applying, the activation keys or the repos or the content there. Um, the filters side of it that we kind of touched upon it, it could also be very powerful because within the filter you can even put a set up a filter on a date, as in,
Hmm.
do not give me any content that's newer than today's date, for example. So any new content that becomes available, you won't be able to see to install it. So for testing purposes, as you're evaluating each one, those are some of the other features that are available to it. And did you know that on satellite you can basically put anything? And when I say anything, meaning, yes, the use cases is for RPMs, obviously, right? But yeah, being that is based on upstream community project and open source projects, is you could put a tarball, you could put an MSI file for a Windows server if you want to. Not that it is supported or something I would recommend, but you could really put just about anything on the satellite. So you got to be very mindful of what you want to do and what you can host. But for like, the organizations that have third-party applications, let's say your Apex or an application that you want to keep in a certain version, that the vendor is very specific of the binaries that you're going to utilize and present to your host, make sure there's no delta to affect production. Satellite's such a powerful control, so you can have that governance and reduce those outages of, oops, somebody updated by mistake because they did yum update and there was no filter.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we are using the most basic of basic
Mhm.
setups here. I mean, one server per environment. There's so many different ways to skin this particular cat.
Yeah,
Um, like quarterly content views. That's only one way of filtering your content.
right.
Um, there's of course if RHEL Presents had a budget, we could spin something up in one of the hyperscalers and really show off the power
Yeah,
of satellite. Now, the question has come up. Uh, where can I try this out? I am so glad that people are asking
yes.
because after episode 1, we actually published the early version of a satellite basics workshop. Now, caveat, because I've been asked this, there is no install portion to this lab.
Yeah.
But if you want to play with the exact same environment that we're showing you on this mini series, go to that link below. Go to red.ht/satellite-basics-workshop, and you can play with RHEL 1, RHEL 2, the satellites, some of the scenarios that we're doing,
Mhm.
and it'll give you a really good idea of what satellites like, what you can work with. You can experiment with some of the filters and some of the scheduling and that
Absolutely.
kind of thing. I think the labs last for about an hour and a half, maybe
Mhm.
2 hours. So get in there, play with it. You only have a couple of hosts you can play with, but this gives you a chance to see what we're seeing.
It's a good place to fall down. It's like you have an idea. It's like, oh, I don't want to mess with our production satellite server. This is a great place. Like, what happens if I do X, Y, and Z? Well, what if I had a nested configuration? Well, it's going to affect production, the performance of how when you promote things. So this is a place where it is safe to try and fall down and just do a sanity check. Is it possible? And does it make sense? Just because you can, just remember, doesn't mean you should do certain things.
The other thing I will say is that we have a growing community over on our Discord over
Discord, yeah.
that way. Grab that QR code or the link should be in the show notes here in the next couple of hours. Grab that link, join our community. We've got a growing group of folks that are out there. Some people asking questions specifically about satellite. So I love to see that, love to engage with people after the show. But did you know, Richard, I'm sure this comes as a shock to you, but did you know that satellite does more than packages?
Oh yeah.
So
Yes,
next
it
week,
does.
next week, our next episode 4, will probably be the last in this particular mini series. We're getting ready to head into release season, and we've got L10 beta coming up, that kind of thing. So we're going to end up cutting this mini series a little bit shorter than we were originally hoping. But so next episode, we're going to talk about some of the non-package related activities, some of the configuration management. Some of the other tools that we can include or that are available as part of Red Hat Satellite. So definitely don't miss out on that. And if you're watching these live, we'll be live a week from today, same time, same YouTube channel. So don't miss Rich and I as we wrap this up.
Bring the questions on, please.
Yeah,
We're here
stump
to
Richard for
inform
me.
and entertain.
Mostly just to stump Richard.
I've only been doing this for, gosh, a decade now.
I'll
Speaking
just
of,
I'll just
I
cop out and
just
go. I'm
got my
just the
puck.
marketing guy.
My 10-year puck finally arrived. Right
Nice.
there.
My 5-year will be in the mail here in a couple months, so I'm really
Nice.
excited about that. So that will wrap up today. We're in the middle of a RHEL webinar series on community Linux versus enterprise Linux. First one of 4 came out yesterday, at the time of this recording. That's why there was no RHEL Presents yesterday. Coming up, though, on RHEL Presents, we've, of course, got the last episode of this mini-series in 2 weeks. I'm hoping to have someone on RHEL Presents proper, our Wednesday show, to talk about high availability. So we've got the HA add-on, and it's actually, in the years that I've been doing RHEL Presents, we haven't talked about HA, and so it is a crime against RHEL that we haven't talked about it. So I'm getting a guest lined up, and hopefully even a customer to talk about HA in the wild. So if you're interested in RHEL high availability, we're going to have that coming up on RHEL Presents. Date yet to be determined, but should be sooner rather than later. And if you like content like this, where it's a little bit shorter, but we spend a lot more time in the terminal or in messing around with the actual technology, definitely check out Into the Terminal on Friday at noon Eastern. This week we're talking about Linux account security and PAM. So Nate and Scott will be live tomorrow at the time of recording to talk about PAM and Linux account security. So lots going on the RHEL YouTube channel. Definitely hit the subscribe button, click that bell so you get notified. We're producing more and more content, and and definitely like this episode. Especially if you didn't like the last episode, this one went much better.
I actually had a great time.
It was fun.
Things
Just
went a little
troubleshooting lab
sideways.
Environments is not my idea of educational content.
It happens. It's life. We did it live.
Folks. Right? Yeah. Even the experts get even the experts get tripped up, especially when it's live. So. Yeah. All right, folks, thank you for joining us. On behalf of myself, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, my guest, my co-host, my guest host, whatever you are, Richard Rios, thank you for joining us. On behalf of Red Hat and the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.